All right, everyone. It's Friday, right before 4th of July weekend. I know everybody's anxious to get to the weekend. I know I am. And welcome to our little show, Q&A with Alan and Marshall. I'm Marshall Atkinson.
I'm Alan Howe with Easy Way.
And we have our good friend Charlie Taublieb with us today. How you doing, Charlie?
I'm doing great, guys. Nice to be here with you.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And Charlie's been world traveler guy, and he's going to talk about a lot of stuff that he's seen. So it's going to be a great show. But right now, what we really would like you to do is just say hello, let us know that you're watching, where you're watching from. And then also don't forget that this is a Q&A show. So we need you to ask questions or drop us a comment or whatever, right? That's how it works here. And so that really helps us out. Also, if you could share that you're watching, that would really help us as well, right? So we're always trying to build our audience and that type of stuff. And we know that a lot of you guys watch or actually listen because, we have the podcast on all the podcast channels later, right? So because you're busy doing stuff while the show's going on. So if you're doing that, please don't forget to put a little thing in there that you watched it later, or you watched the recap or listened later. That helps us kind of track that a little bit. So Anyway, appreciate you guys. And look, our buddy Glenn's here.
Yep. And I think we should let everybody know we're having you've had a little bit of technical problems, Marshall, and I'm not sure. I'm looking at our stats. I'm not sure we're actually on LinkedIn. It's showing we are, but
really
it's looking a little weird. So, yeah.
Well, that's StreamYard. Not my tech issues are about my connectivity with my microphone.
Okay.
And it has nothing to do with the show. It's just about me.
Yep, that's
broadcasting, and I've been dealing it for 2 days. And don't get me started.
No, I won't. But yeah, so if you can hear us, if you're having a tech issue, please go to YouTube or Facebook or something, and
okay,
up there. So yeah,
so it has a check mark up at the top that says we're on LinkedIn.
Yeah, but it doesn't show the profile, which it usually does.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I'm just noticed that
it says you are live.
Yes, it is.
That's a good thing.
Hold on, I can view on LinkedIn, and let's just see.
So, Charlie, while he's checking that, man, what have you been doing all week? I mean, you just got back from, 3 weeks in Europe and stuff. So,
well, actually, I came back to the U.S. in between.
Oh, okay, nice.
Trying to pack 3 weeks worth of clothing for 2 shows is brutal.
Right.
Neither one was a short show. FESPA was a 4-day long show.
Right.
So I spent a week in Munich between getting there the day before the show, thinking I was going to hit the convention center the day before the show to help set up. Well, the guys from Vastex had already set up, so I didn't have to do that.
Nice.
I was actually able to try and work on my jet lag, which was definitely a challenge. What's amazing is the cost of going to Europe now. So in the past, I used to go to Germany quite a bit, 2-3 times a year. The airline ticket would generally run about $1,000 or a little less. My flight was direct from Denver to Munich, and that one was $2,100.
Yeah.
And that's for sitting in the back of the plane.
Yeah.
No
upgrades, no amenities.
Oh, no, not at all. And then even going to Milan, which was another, I can fill you in on that. So my connection from Denver to London was late. We left Denver a couple hours late. I missed my connection by about 10 minutes, where I was supposed to hop on a Lufthansa flight to Munich and then Munich to Milan. So had to get rescheduled onto a Swiss Air flight to Zurich. And so after about 3 or 4 hours in the airport, I get onto that flight, get to Zurich. And I've got one of those air tags in my bag to see where my bags are.
Right.
I don't know if you ever do that, but I had 2 bags with me and I only had one of the air tags. In any event, showed that my bag was in Zurich while I was there. So that was great news. I got to Milan, my bags were still in Zurich.
Oh, not good.
And so it was like, really, you got to be kidding me, man. I mean, I need the stuff that's in there.
Yep.
I had my medication in there. I had all the stuff I needed for the show. I go and I file with them in the U.S. when they miss your bags. I'll get into Denver and they'll say, yeah, your bags didn't arrive. And somewhere during the middle of the night, they'll put them on my front door. There, it's like, oh, well, we'll get them to you in about 1 to 2 days. That's no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
1 to 2 days is not good.
Yeah, exactly.
In any event, 2 days later, one bag shows up, and 3 days later, my other bag shows up. So that was, and that lovely ticket was only $1,800.
When I was in Milan in 2019, I think 17 or 18 it was. That's not a quick flight. I don't think there's directs there. So I went from Detroit, I think, to New York to Milan, but then coming back, it was, Detroit to, or coming back, it was Milan to Charles de Gaulle Airport in France, which worst airport in the world in my mind.
Absolutely the worst.
Awful.
I mean, if you don't have 2 hours between flights, you're not making your flight.
Just awful. I've never heard anybody say, "Yeah, I love CDG."
Yeah,
but yeah. Then it's from there to Detroit. Those are not easy flights. I actually think to me, it's a harder flight than when I go to Asia, which is, Detroit to California or Detroit to, Tokyo to the Philippines. I'd rather have one long one, but man, they're just brutal flights.
But in any event, finally got to Germany. I love Munich. I mean, I've been there, I don't know how many times. I was born not far from there.
Oh, okay.
So the first time I ever went and did a show overseas was in 1999, which was FESPA in Munich. And so I went to my, quote unquote, my hometown for the first time and only time. I was born in a little town between Garmisch-Partenkirchen and Innsbruck, Austria, called Mittenwald, which means middle of the forest, which it was. It's a tourist town now. And so they're known for their violin making. So I hopped on a train, went down there. The whole damn train emptied out into the place. What's interesting in Germany is most people speak English.
Oh, nice.
Until you get to the small towns.
Right.
Then they speak no English. Or if they do speak English, they're not going to accommodate you. They're going to continue with German.
Yeah.
So went there, kicked around, decided, I remember it from when I was 3 years old. Thanks very much. Hasta la vista. But Munich itself is an amazing city. I mean, I just love going there. My wife is a fan of Berlin. I'm definitely a fan of Munich. But I've traveled Germany quite a bit, doing shows in Cologne and Dusseldorf and Stuttgart. But in any event, show was 4 days long. In FESPA was 4 days long in Munich, and not much screen print. M&R had a really small island. The only one who was actually there was David Blake, and then some supporting cast.
Okay.
Danny Sweem and Peter Welsh were not there. The only other automatics there, Anatole had one, and Rock had one small, and both had small ones. And then there was that was it. Those three. M&R was in the quote unquote screen print hall, which was made up predominantly of the FESPA lounge.
Wow.
As opposed to screen print. We were in the Rock, Anatole, and I was with Vastex. We were all in the digital hall, which was a full-size hall with lots of activity, etc. It's a regional show now. To call it an international show or a global show, you can call it whatever you want. The only thing that's global about it is all the digital side. Big talk at the show was DTF. Lots and lots of that. Lots of talk about it. As far as screen print went, Germany is the quote unquote the center of the screen print world in Europe. So they did get a lot of Germans. We had a fair amount of people from many of the other countries. I don't know how many countries were involved, but decent amount, but all European countries. And, the show absolutely focused on anything but screen print.
Right. So, Charlie, tell everybody what FESPA means. And like to all of us, FESPA was the show.
Okay,
At
so
one time. So,
FESPA stands for the Federation of European Screen Printing Associations.
yep.
Yeah. Well, it may stand for it, but it isn't anything to do with it anymore. The companies that they cater to are the digital companies that are taking these monster booths and spending lots of money on this show as sponsors, et cetera, which I certainly understand that the financial side is definitely part of what shows are about. No one's being critical about that. But at the same time, it was a screen printing organization. That was its foundation. As a matter of fact, Michelle Kaza was one of the originators, one of the founders. And I've been working with FESPA. I've done my first FESPA show was 1999, but from 2005, 2007, I worked with MHM and also with International Coatings at FESPA. And then somewhere not long after that, FESPA actually had me start working with them up until about 2019. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. But I worked with them for probably 12, 13, 14 years doing their shows all over the world. The big show was always once every 3 to 4 years. They made it a point of not having their show during Drupa, but they
which was every 5 years, if I remember right.
And it's a monster show in Dusseldorf, and it takes up, I don't know how many, pretty much the same thing that ITMA does. ITMA is not as much of a factor to them, although they tried to avoid it because there's a fair amount of crossover. This time there was a week in between the two shows, which is ridiculous. And, even for a lot of the exhibitors, they were almost at a point where it's like, if I exhibit at one, I can't exhibit at the other, or I have to have totally different teams that come into it.
Right. And ITMA stands for?
It's a
International Textile Machinery
Show. So it's a textile machinery show. It's the biggest in the world. So just to give you an idea, the attendance was above 111,000 people.
That's crazy.
Which,
so
I think they said they had 147 countries represented in terms of attendees, and like 48 countries that were exhibiting.
Right.
Hey, before we get too far down the line, I want to run our commercial real quick for GSG, who's our sponsor, and then we can come back with more Charlie. Okay, so let's get that going. So a huge shout out to GSG for sponsoring our show. Thank you, and watch this real quick.
GSG, the combination of over half a century of knowledge with industry-leading technology and the customer at the center of everything that we do. Graphic Solutions Group is a powerhouse distributor of traditional screen, sign, wide format digital printing, embroidery, and textile decorating. We are committed to our customers, providing support, educational, and consulting services. Your success is our success. We've seen these industries grow and change in our 70 years. One thing never changes: GSG's dedication providing the best products and services available. We've been around, we'll be around, from the highs and the lows, standing right here with you. GSG, the right products, right away.
Awesome. Hey, before we pick this back up, maybe we should have Charlie introduce himself, tell him, about
who is this guy?
We assume everybody knows him, but he's been an icon ever since I've been in the industry. But Charlie, tell us everybody a little bit about yourself, what you do.
I got into the industry on July 1st of 1976, doing bootleg rock and roll shirts. So my first shirt
Nobody ever does that.
Was for the Wings concert coming to Madison Square Garden in 1976. And based on that, the guy who I actually did this shirt for, I was doing the button for, I worked for ABC Network and was doing the button that was going to be given away at the concert from ABC Radio. The guy who came up to see me was a friend of the family who had gotten out of what he was doing and was selling T-shirts on the street. And saw what I was doing, asked if I could blow up the design so he could have his screen printer print it. And I still have that shirt, by the way. That's the only rock and roll shirt I still own from back in the day. And it was washed once and almost lost all the image, but I didn't do the print on it. I only did the designing. In any event, came back a week later. I was doing quite a bit of freelance. He said, take your freelance accounts and design for me, and let's go and open up a screen printing factory. So lunchtime came, jumped in his car, drove to Brooklyn to the Bedford-Stuyvesant area, which is now fairly upscale. Back then, it was kind of like the south side of Chicago, I guess would be a good way of putting it. Good chance of getting mugged if you were there. In any event, we went and rented 15,000 square feet. I came back, I quit my job, I went home and I told my wife. And so that was my introduction to screen print. When I was in college, I was a art major with a major in painting, minor in printmaking and drawing. And I refused to do that stupid thing called silk screening. I wanted 500-pound limestones that I could work on that I knew weren't going to move. Yeah. But that was how I got into it. And then I'm actually almost finished with my second book, which is it's called From Bootlegger to Consultant, my 45 plus years in screen printing, and kind of go through all of that in terms of how I got into it. It's got a bunch of the images of shirts that I was involved with that I actually had to lift out of somebody else's book because I don't own any of the shirts, but a guy put out his collection of T-shirts, and he obviously loved a lot of what we sold on the streets. So a lot of my stuff is in there. And went to my first show in 1977, an SPA show in
which is now Printing United. It's more
which is Printing United. So I've watched it go through all of the phases, but that was in Anaheim, and I went there because I'd been in the industry for like 15 months at that point, or somewhere around there, 16 months, and figured, man, I'm going to go to this thing. I'm going to learn something. Problem that I had was everybody wanted to know how I did my shirts. We were doing everything on black shirts because that's the only thing I sold at concerts. We were doing up to 5-color, 6-color work, all on print tables at that time, the long tables. Saw my first automatic at that show because I could never, I had an offset background, and I could never understand how they can get a shirt to go through all of those little wheels and come out the other end. And of course, they didn't go through the little wheels. I mean, I was as ignorant as you can imagine about screen printing. In any event, everybody wanted to know how I was able to print on black shirts and have all my colors come out vibrant. And really, the whole thing came down to the artwork and a lot of color on color, etc.
And this was, people don't understand, this was before flash units, so there was no flash.
Correct. Yeah, white was always printed last.
And then from there, I know, and we're going to move on a little bit because we're going to talk about your book and some of your journey too. But then you know, when I came in the industry, you owned your own supply company, Bullseye Supply, out of Denver, and you've moved on where you've been consulting forever now, all over the world.
Well, I started actually consulting back in the late 70s. We were doing work for a large children's wear manufacturer. We would do the screens and sampling for them, send the screens down to Pig, Alabama.
Right.
And they would then print the jobs, and they came out horribly. So I was asked to fly down there to see what they were doing, how they were doing it, what could be done better. Well, they were using plastisol ink is not very difficult to make. It's used in carpet backing, among other things. And so the head of their production was a preacher who came from the carpet industry. And so he was running the shop and he was buying his ink from the guy down the road. I mean, you opened up a 50-gallon drum and there were boots and God only knows what else in there besides ink. And it's like, well, no wonder your shirts look like crap. It's not really an ink that has any opacity, et cetera, among other things. In any event, I came back, I gave him my invoice. And that's when you learn that if you don't charge enough, nobody takes you seriously. And so they paid my invoice, and then they hired a real consultant. Irving Levine was his name. I still remember it to this day. And Irving went down, and it almost looked like he copied my report, except for one thing. He charged him through the nose. And so they took him really seriously. And so that was the first lesson that I learned was if you don't charge enough and if it doesn't hurt at all, then no one's going to take you seriously. And so you don't have to kill someone with it, but you got to make them feel like they've got a vested interest in doing what you're recommending.
Right.
And I'm sure both of you guys are involved with the same type of situation. If it's free, it has no value. And so you can't just do for free because it's not taken on a serious note. And here you are giving away, your time, your expertise, et cetera, and it's going nowhere. But in any event, I started consulting back then. And based on the situations that I had at the shows of my shirts being looked at pretty intently, I was asked to, if I would put together some seminars. So in 1980, I did technical symposium in Pittsburgh and spoke about printing on black shirts. And that's where I knew there were people who were coming to that just to shoot down my whole procedure, especially a guy by the name of Gene Krupinski from Advanced Process Supply. And so I printed up about 350 of my King Tut image.
Right.
So on black Pellon. So everyone, as they came in the room, was handed a black Pellon. And so I did my 15 minutes because the person in front of me went overboard. And me, I have to admit, I was scared shitless. There were about 300 people in that room. And having never spoken before, I mean, you want to talk about intimidation. It was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Somehow I got out whatever I was supposed to say. I don't know if anyone understood it or not because my teeth were banging together so hard that I couldn't believe it myself. But all the things that I learned in college about speech started to come in and projecting to the back of the room, blah, blah, blah. In any event, I'm done. I get no questions. Well, I got no questions. They couldn't shoot me down because everybody had a copy of what I was doing in their hand. So, based on that, I got asked to start speaking at the impression shows. And,
that's great. So we have a lot of comments here, but I want to throw some out there. So Josh Wiley says, Charlie was my first big class at SGIA, and I started my journey to where we are today. Literally bought a roller table and 25 Newman roller frames before I left his class.
All right.
It's great. And then Dan's here. Good to see you, Dan. And he asked a question. Charlie, did they have the carousel press at the time you started that Mark Vasselton Sr. had patented?
That was the...
that when you started.
That was the double Lazy Susan, the rotary that he did. And that would have been around 1968, 69.
Well, I bought my first press, which happened to be a Vastex press from Advanced Process Supply, which was made by Vastex, but through Advanced. And it was a 6-color, 4-station rotary. And the registration system was not at all, your screen actually created the registration, not anything else. And it was held by like 2 prongs on either side of the screen. So if I needed to move over a 1/4 of an inch, we'd pull the screen off, staple on a 1/4 of an inch worth of cardboard and slot it back in, which would then shift it about a 1/4 of an inch. in any event, I bought it to do rock and roll. Well, about 2 to 3 dozen into, I needed to get 100 dozen shirts out in that morning. And I'm printing away, and we're about 2 dozen into it or 3 dozen into it, and realized that it's going to take us days to do 100 dozen of a 5 or 6 color job. Got in a car, drove to New Jersey, bought a precision automatic. And at that time, there were 2 presses. Advanced made a round machine, Precision made an oval, and Precision had a 4, 5, or a 6 color.
Yep.
And so I had a bag of $22,000 in cash with me. Plunked it down. I said, I need a press. Then they said, what do you want? And I thought 4 colors sounds small, 5, 6 colors sounds too big. I'll buy a 5 color automatic, which is probably the dumbest machine you could ever buy. But nevertheless, that was my first machine. Len Herman and Dave Jaffa. Dave Jaffa was the owner. Len Herman was the head of sales. They took my money into the back room. They came back out. They gave me a receipt for $18,000. So I don't really care. I just want my machine. You can do whatever you want with the money. Weeks later, I had to hire a crane because I was on the 5th floor. We had to have all the windows taken out.
Yep.
Had the press hauled in. That's when you find out that whoever takes out the windows doesn't have any obligation, but whoever puts them back in is now responsible for them. It took us about 3 days to find someone who would weld them back in. So we had to have a guy hang out in our factory for that time, because if someone decided to shimmy down from the roof, which was above the 6th floor, they'd get in and throw all the shirts out so that they could sell them. So we had to have a guy hang out for that time period. In any event, press sat there for several days until we had a technician come in and wire it up. We were terrified about turning it on the wrong way. Maybe it would blow up, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, ignorance is one of those things that we definitely participated in. But about a year later, I went back to Precision. I said, I need another machine. I don't care if it's a 6 color, an 8 color, or a 6 jumbo. And they said, we're 8 weeks out. I said, no. Let me explain something. I need a machine within 2 weeks. And they said, yeah, but we're 8 weeks out. I said, okay, what do I got to do to get one in 2 weeks? They said, well, buy 2 and we'll deliver one in 2 weeks. Great, I'll take 2. I don't care which 2 you deliver, but I need them, and I need one of them in 2 weeks. And so I got my second and third machine. And, you know, when you're doing rock and roll, it's not unusual to, after the way out, meaning after the concert, they would count up all of what they had, get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning saying, hey, we're going to be in Kansas City tomorrow. We need to have 100 dozen shirts there by the time the show is working its way in. And so we get up first thing in the morning, bang out 100 dozen shirts, go to LaGuardia Airport, slip one of the guys $100 to put on our 35 cases of excess baggage, which would then arrive in Kansas City on time. And you couldn't send it freight because freight is unloaded so late that you'd miss the way into the concert. So every once in a while, we'd have to stick somebody on a plane that would actually fly to Kansas City or wherever, go across the aisle and fly back. I mean, I had my guys who'd never flown before, and that was their introduction to flying, was sitting on a plane with excess baggage and coming back same day.
I've put stuff on Greyhound buses before.
Yep, and we've done that.
To go from Brooklyn to Kansas City, you're not getting on a Greyhound bus and making it by 5 o'clock that evening.
That's true.
And for $100, I mean, of course, in today's world, we can't do that, but that's what we used to do. You know, it was a time frame where it's difficult to explain to someone today what things were like.
Yeah.
But, you know, even the $100, I mean, it sounds like nothing. Our first really big job, we got a call from a company called Nike that wants us to do shirts for them. I was a runner at the time, and so I had my race director special, and somebody at Nike got a hold of it. And so they needed to have custom-made shirts. They didn't have a design team, so we did the designing for them and everything. So there's 3 different designs. And as a matter of fact, in the book that I'm almost finished with, they're in there. Nike didn't have the money to get on a plane to come into Brooklyn to see us. We didn't have the money to go to Beaverton, Oregon. So everything was done over the phone. It was a $65,000 order in 1978, 79. There's there. That's not a big deal. It's about a $350,000 order today. And so these were shirts that were going to the 1980 Olympic Games, which is the one that the U.S. boycotted because it was in Moscow. And so in 1981, I went to the New York Marathon finish line, and I realized, damn, almost every elite runner is wearing my shirt. So in 82, I ran the marathon, and 83. But it was kind of a kick. And of course, we did the designing and everything. You didn't really need approvals in terms of conforming to the corporate structure that they now have. I don't think, I think one of the designs would have survived in today's world, but the other two would have been killed because they just didn't conform to what Nike needs today in order to be.
Did they still have the swoosh?
Huh?
They still have the swoosh then?
I have images of the three shirts.
No, but were they using the swoosh then?
The Nike swoosh.
Yeah, one of the shirts had the swoosh made into a circle. So it was a whole series of swooshes, and underneath it in kind of a block letter, it said Nike. The other was just a Nike design. It was all swirly, and I forget what the other one was, but I do have it blown up in my book just because those were legitimate shirts that we did. We did do legitimate work. I mean, not everything was bootleg, but the times were different in terms of demands. They wanted vibrant colors back then, but as far as the hand went, nobody was too worried about how soft it was. The nice thing about rock and roll and printing and doing shirts on the street, if the shirt wasn't cured, oh well.
Yeah.
We never got any returns.
From a rock and roll show.
That being said, Winterland was one of the companies that handled a lot of the rock groups. They were bootlegging like crazy as well. They did different type of bootlegging. So I don't know if you know anything about how venues work, but Madison Square Garden, if you're selling something there, Madison Square Garden gets 50% of the take.
Yep.
So if it's a $10 item, they get $5. Nassau Coliseum got 55%. So at a rock concert, someone like Winterland would bring in, let's say, 200 shirts, of which, the venue would get 50% of the take. And then they'd sneak in another couple of hundred shirts, which they could actually make some money on. And so did they do that? Yeah. So at my first show, we exhibited at the very first ISS show in Atlantic City. And right opposite us is Winterland. And right there is a Blues Brothers shirt. Here's the thing. I had the rights to the Blues Brothers. They were bootlegging it. So it was such a joy to walk over to that booth and say, if you don't take the shirt down, and have the show close your booth down. And so that shirt immediately came off. They did plenty of bootlegging, but they were the legitimate company.
Right.
And, nothing against them, but, we all had our moments back then.
Right.
That's great.
In any event.
Well, let's.
So if you are watching right now and you have a question for Charlie, throw it in the chat. And we need to run a quick promo for GSG for their Pulse. So let's just do that right quick. So here's their Pulse magazine, which you can find at gogsg.com. So the Pulse has their latest, it's their catalog with all their kind of their mini catalog actually, but it's got all of their different things that you can get in there, from ink to machines, all types of things. And so if you just go to gogsg.com, it's right here at the top in their banner. And it'll scroll over eventually, and then there's the Pulse. Just click that button, and that's how you find it. Lots of great deals and specials and all kinds of things you can find right there in the Pulse magazine. So go to gogsg.com, and you can find it there. All right. Back to Charlie.
Charlie, so we've talked about FESPA, and a little disappointing from where it was to what it is now, and that's sad to say. But ITMA is on the upswing. From what it sounds like.
So I did work my first ITMA show in 2019. I went to my first ITMA show after I was in Munich in 1999. We caught the last day of ITMA, which was in Paris at that time.
Right.
And at that time, it was a 10-day show. And we caught it on the last day, which was really wonderful because for the other 9 days in France, they have strikes all the time. They had a transit strike. There were people who had to walk 5 and 6 miles each way every day to get to and from the show. Fortunately, on the last day, they lifted the strike. And so we went out there. The show was just crazy big. If you didn't know, and Screenprint made up a tiny portion on the second floor of one of the buildings. In any event, that was my introduction to ITMA. But just to give you an idea of how big it was, on the first day of the show, they planted some cotton. On the last day, they actually had a harvester going through it and picking the cotton. And it was like, you got to be kidding. I mean, I walked into that particular hall, and here's this harvester going up and down the rows, and knocking out the cotton.
Cotton grows that fast? That's crazy.
It was already planted. There was small planted plants, I guess, when they started, and so 10 days later, whatever was left, it was just to show the whole process. In any event, that was my first introduction to ITMA. In 2019, I worked ITMA with Inkwin, the ink company I worked with this time, and the show was in Barcelona. Loved Barcelona, but the show itself was really disappointing. Screenprint made up a corner on one of the halls. M&R was there, MHM was there, a couple of others were there, but all in all, pretty dead. And so I didn't understand why they took space again at ITMA for this year's show. And it was kind of interesting. So their last show was 2019, just before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And now it's just after the pandemic. So they missed all of the in-between, which is kind of good on their side. But even at FESPA, there's a lot of talk about, who's going to ITMA. And all you heard was everybody was going to ITMA. Okay. So FESPA was catering to what I would call more of a regional situation. A lot of the small print shops, not that there weren't any big ones, but a lot of small ones, anything from big equipment to small equipment, ta-da. You got into ITMA, and it was massive. It was 12 halls. I can't tell you how big it was, but I think in their little post thing, they said it was something over 200,000 square meters, which, I don't know, several million square feet. 145 countries were represented in terms of exhibiting, and like 48 countries in terms of attendees. Mm-hmm. There were absolutely no less than 12 automatics there. Most of them being ovals of some type, with digital heads on them, among other things. Show had a great buzz to it. First 3 days were busy as hell. Sunday was the fourth day, not much because it's still a Catholic country.
Sure.
Family times. But what we did see in the first 3 days were a huge number of companies from Bangladesh and China, India, Pakistan, the garment countries, so to speak.
Vietnam, Laos.
Didn't see too much from that. I think a lot of those companies from Vietnam are owned by the Chinese.
Got it.
And so you saw a lot more Chinese, although there could have certainly been a lot of others. Sure. But I'm friendly with a lot of the people from Bangladesh, and I'm certainly familiar with them, and from Sri Lanka. And all the major companies were at FESPA. I mean, at ITMA. Huge.
Right.
Nicest thing about European shows, you can eat and drink without having to go to a concession stand. Everybody makes coffee in the morning, so you can get your shot of espresso or double to rip your eyes open. During the day, you can go walking around munching on almost any booth that you know anyone. But huge booths, like I mentioned, Epson, and there was a major amount of digital. Epson had the biggest booth, and it was mentioned that the booth space, forgetting about anything going into it, was $1.1 million for just the space.
Wow.
Which, when you start thinking about it, it's like, really, how big was it? It was monstrous, man. I got to tell you. I mean, you look down and it was like, holy cows, are you kidding me?
And two-story booths.
Floors high. Huh?
Yeah. And you said it was 2 stories too.
Yeah.
So I have a question, Charlie. So comparing what we do here in the States to those two shows, can you talk about how the shows are organized by education, with training, because a lot of people come to shows to look at equipment, but a lot of times they're bringing staff to learn how to do stuff. And of course, all three of us teach. So I'm very curious about their mentality on that.
So for years and years, I worked with FESPA doing really more seminars, but a little bit on the hands-on side.
Mm-hmm.
They have definitely done more with the digital side, et cetera. Don't hear much at all about them doing anything with screen print as far as seminars or whatever. And if they do, they're keeping it as a pretty good secret because I don't know a whole lot about it.
I don't think they're doing any.
Not much if they're doing anything at all.
Right.
Printing United, to be honest with you, was pretty much disappointing on the same level.
Yep.
At one time they used to do a fair amount of seminars, not only in screen print, but going across the whole spectrum of what was going on.
Yep.
I just didn't see any of it this time. ITMA, I guess, may have had something to do with some seminars, but no publicity that I saw. But I think most of the companies who were coming to ITMA you had all the managers and all the owners, et cetera. Were they going to really go to seminars? Probably not. They were there for equipment. It is an absolute equipment show.
It is a textile machinery show.
I think you have to get a feel for how big and how much equipment there is. They allowed companies to start setting up on May 22nd for a show that started, I think it was June 5th or 6th.
Right.
Okay. And it took that long for some of them to actually get their equipment built.
Yeah.
Normally when we do a show in the States, they'll get 2, maybe 3 days before a show that they can put it all in. There's no chance at this place where you can get that done.
So just thinking about education, Charlie, what do you think is happening these days with, the folks that are organizing these events and not giving the people that really want to learn and do things in the industry that don't know basic stuff? And like I was just in a shop earlier this month, and they didn't have any clue about how to measure screen tension. It's not like it's a secret. It's just because they don't know what they don't know. So how are companies supposed to know this stuff if we're not educating them and pushing that like we should be? It just seems like we're going to be the dog chasing its tail all the time. Don't you think?
I do agree. What's interesting to me is FESPA used to have a fair amount of seminars. You really want to get an education or get started in this industry as far as a screen printer, the U.S. is where you got to be. Any of the Impressions Expos, the DAX shows that I do definitely are slanted heavily towards education. You have the Graphic Expo, which I have my issues about, but nevertheless, there are seminars there. So we really provide more in this country than anybody else as far as that type of situation goes. When I do shows over in India and Bangladesh and stuff, I always do seminars. They're very big on it. And it's not the big companies that are coming, it's the small companies that are really coming to the seminars. The big companies, to be honest with you, you go to see them as opposed to them coming to see you.
Sure.
Although when I do go there, usually on the last night that I'm there, we'll do a dinner with invited guests and we'll conduct a seminar during dinner in terms of a recap of what I've seen, where I think some of the companies, without naming the company specifically, where what their direction might change to,
Mhm.
where their future might be, etc. Education to me is huge. Obviously, for all three of us, it's
Yep.
huge. And really, the best is in this country. The difficulty for someone first starting out is trying to find some information. There's YouTube, which I have my issues with, because
Absolutely.
to post on YouTube, you don't have to have any qualifications. And there's some really good stuff. There's a lot of really bad stuff. And if you don't know any better, you're going to start believing a lot of the bad stuff. I'm on Facebook way too often, and I see some of the posts and some of the answers, and some of the answers are asinine.
Yeah.
When I started out to reclaim a screen, we used bleach.
Right.
Well, we used bleach because we didn't know any better. And does it work? Well, it works, but why would you do that when you can buy a commercial product that'll do it in a fraction of the time and do a much better job? And cost-wise per unit is actually less. But of course, you got to know that.
Well, and let's think about when you over bleach a t-shirt over and over, what happens? It starts peeling apart. What is screen printing mesh? It's a fabric.
Well, you have to
bleach it
understand,
over and over, it's going to start peeling apart.
back in the day, we used a multi-filament polyester.
Yep.
And so did we worry about the screen? We did it for a job. We take a razor blade, cut out the mesh, and and staple on the next piece.
So you know what happened, though? This is early in my story when someone was reclaiming with bleach. It took me a while to figure it out, and the great Al Petsy helped me. And they were using capillary film, and I get this call, and I thought it was like a joke call. Putting capillary film, and as he was applying it, when it was wet, he would put it on, then it would start disappearing on him. Literally just being eaten away.
Would eat it up.
Yeah, so it took Al Petsy. I called him and figured out. He says, "Alan, is he reclaiming with bleach? It was multi-filament and stuff, and the bleach would dry, and so when it got wetted, it re-wetted, and he'd put the capillary film on, and it would just start eating it right away." So can you reclaim with bleach? Yes. Should you? No.
No, it's a stupid thing to do. That's why I say I reclaimed with a razor blade.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I never ran into the problem of disappearing emulsion. Of course, emulsions back then were quite different. Also, we used things that are not available anymore, micromade emulsions.
So to keep our show on track, we're going to run out of time here. I want to get to your new book, Charlie.
And my book was written specifically.
I've got a copy right here. Here it is. It's a really great book, and I love the fact that it's spiral bound, so you can flip it open. And there's a lot of really great stuff in here that you guys can use. So, Charlie, talk about this book and why you wrote it, and where can somebody get a copy?
Okay, so I would normally travel about close to 200 days a year. Then the pandemic hit. And, when you're sitting at home twiddling your thumbs and you're used to not being at home, you got to find something to do, and especially if you're married, your wife will drive you out of your mind otherwise. And so I decided, you know what? I've been doing seminars and workshops since the 70s. Why don't I start putting that into a book format? I do enough seminars, especially for a lot of beginners. And so why not put something together that a beginner or somebody intermediate and even advanced could use? And so the book is definitely screen print oriented, but there's some stuff in there for dipping and spraying shirts and, doing tie-dye type effects quickly without rubber bands, etc. And so I started putting it together. And, the more you do, the more you find in your log of stuff that you have more and more things. I mean, that book is from cover to cover is 260 pages. And it's like, damn, I didn't think I could write that much in my life. In any event, I put it together really for someone who just wants to really get into the industry, or someone who wants to sharpen up in a particular area. Mm-hmm. So it starts out with building your own registration mark and registration system. By the way, that other book, the Rock Tees, that's the one that I didn't write, but it has a bunch of my shirts in it. But my book is offered as a download and also as a spiral version, mostly because trying to send that book overseas would be ridiculous. I actually had to send 2 of them to Andy up in Canada. In the US, it was running me $5.05 to ship 1 book. And to Canada for the 2 books was $55.55.
Lord Almighty.
And it's
they
like,
they have a thing for fives in Canada, Charlie.
yeah, I mean, it was crazy. So, you know, shipping books overseas or to another country is definitely not a viable situation. But you can download the book off my website, which is taubliebconsulting.com. And as far as the spiral version, you'd have to get in touch with me. I guess it is on my website now. I haven't checked lately.
Well, I've got your website up here, Charlie, and I'm showing it. So it's just taubliebconsulting.com/books.
Yeah.
And then you got your books right here. And then you can get it ordered. And how much is the book?
So the download is $55 and the book is $85 plus tax and shipping.
Yep. And it's a great book. I've read it, and there's a lot of really good stuff in there. So I think everybody, if you're in this business, it's all in, it's $100, let's say. And let me tell you, I mean, how much do you charge a lot more of that to come to a shop, right?
Well, I do. As a matter of fact, I'm getting ready to do my summer road trip. So I leave on July 8th to start my road trip, which I've broken into 2 parts. So I'm going to be gone for 22 days on my road trip. And for the summer on my road trip, I do a discount on my normal fee. Normal fee is listed right on my website. It's $2,000 a day plus expenses, 3 to 5 days. When I do my road trip, I try and make it easier on the small shop. So it's anywhere from 1 to 3 days. I pick up all my own expenses, and I've discounted my fee pretty dramatically, actually.
Yep.
Again, I'm a believer that it's got to hurt your pocket a bit in order for it to really be effective. But I'm also sympathetic to the fact that a small shop, I mean, if you're going to bring me in, it's going to run you somewhere between $7,000 and $8,000 for the 3 days. And there's, I'm realistic. Small shop is just not going to be sitting with that kind of money. So for my road trip through the Midwest, I make it easier. And I call it quits at probably about a 10-hour day. Got to boogie on to the next one. But it's the only time I get a chance to really drive my car and really let it out. So,
what kind of car do you have?
I have a Porsche, a bright yellow Porsche Boxer, which, so when I first got it, I got it a week before my road trip a number of years ago. And I'm in the northern part of South Dakota, 10 o'clock at night, and I'm passing a truck and the flashing lights go off. Cop pulls me over and he says, "You know how fast you were going?" I said, "Yeah, I thought I was doing 83. He said, "You were. It's an 80-mile-an-hour zone." Pulled me over so that he could look at the car. I sat in his. He gave me a whole rundown on who the original owner was, where it came from, blah, blah, blah. Then he gave me a warning ticket for 3 miles an hour over the limit. Figure that one out. Spooked the hell out of me. I don't think I ever went more than 10 miles an hour over the limit. But
I know you've been to some of my accounts in Michigan before, Charlie, and it's money well spent. They both loved it. They all,
Well, your guy's up in the middle of Michigan. Sandlot Sports,
that was
among
it.
others.
Yep.
And also,
and they may or may not be listening. They sometimes lurking behind. So.
And what's her name? Lindsay up in
at TR McTaggart's.
Yeah, what's interesting at McTaggart? I actually did consulting work for them about 25 years ago.
Yep.
And so the art director there remembered me when I came back. Of course, they had changed their place, etc.
That would have been Ken McDonald was the production manager and stuff then.
What, 25 years back?
Yep.
Okay. Well, all I remember is going up there and it was like, wow, this place is a disaster. And then going back and it's like wow, this place is still a disaster, but it's definitely doing much, much better now.
Way better. Yep.
So that's
And
all
then
good.
before we run out of time, I also want to push out your Charlie's Corner, right? So why don't you
Yes.
talk about that a little bit? And you have a special guest coming up, right? And who is that? And why should somebody watch?
Actually, I just had Beppe from
Yep.
Virus was just on this past Tuesday. The next one is actually on my road trip. I'm going to be at a company called QQP up in Aberdeen, South Dakota. But Beppe's whole song and dance is on my website. So if anybody wants to catch any of the old Charlie's Corners, they're pretty much all on there. Again, just go to my website and go under Charlie's Corner.
I've been on it.
Yeah,
I've already been a guest on it. So
yeah, Beppe was at both FESPA and ITMA, and it was kind of fun to actually have him on and talk about his whole song and dance and how he got into the industry.
Yeah, so I'm showing that now, Charlie. So
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, I try and do it every other Tuesday, and for the most part, I do. Every once in a while, I'll have to move it just because of conflicts, but it's just an open session. It's a Zoom session, so you can come on, ask questions, chat, whatever.
okay, great.
And
very nice.
I don't really have a formal situation. Everybody says, "What should I prepare?" And my answer is, just be yourself. Don't worry about it.
Great.
I'm kind of an informal guy anyway, so
Yeah. And you always have the best shirts.
And I do wear T-shirts, by the way. So this is a Robert Graham T-shirt. Of course, I do wear other T-shirts, but
Yeah.
decided, you guys were definitely wearing college shirts. I decided
This is my
back today.
I went and got my when I grow up I want to be Charlie shirt.
It's funny, when I got to ITMA, my bags didn't show up, so I had to go out and buy some clothing.
Oh no.
Here it is, the fashion capital of the world, right? Milan.
Mhm.
Try and find a loud shirt in Milan was like, forget it, man. So I bought a shirt that was pretty much black and white with a little gray.
Mhm.
Wore it to the show on the first day, and everyone's saying, "Is that really you?"
Yeah.
And it's like, sorry, my bags didn't show up.
Yep.
So you almost had to go around explaining why you didn't have something on that was loud. But for the next 6 days, I did. But yeah, we all have our marketing approach. My shirts are my marketing approach. But in any event, do hope that some of you are interested in my book. If you have questions about it, my second book is almost done. I know I didn't have any write-up on you guys, but I do have photos of you in it from when we were doing some cigars and drinks at one of the shows, and also at your event in Chicago last year at the summit. So
Sure.
that's all going into the book. And once I have it, I will shoot a copy off to you guys.
Well, great.
Great.
You can give me a rundown on what you think beforehand.
Well, I know we've done cigars a few times. We just did in Vegas last year, and it's kind of a thing.
It's kind of a nice thing to do. And from what it sounds like, we're going to be doing the Academy dinner, I guess, at the show is what it's sounding like more and more.
I don't know. I hope. What do you think? And you know what? I'm going to give my little Charlie plug for me. Charlie was chairman of the Academy when I was nominated and voted in, and he was the one that called me. And I don't know if you remember Charlie. I mean, Charlie could be pretty much just a matter of fact, suck it up. This is the business part. But I had to step out. It was such a big honor for me from where I was at. And I said, Charlie, I'm sorry. I'm probably going to get emotional. And he was great. He goes, you should be. This is huge, Alan. And he goes, welcome to the Academy.
Listen, I was the same way.
Yeah.
I still have my certificate hanging. What's interesting for me is mine is signed by Scott Fresner.
So mine's signed by you, and so
and I did workshops. I put in Scott's advanced workshop back in 1981.
Mm-hmm.
which is in my book. But I think it's a huge thing to be inducted in the academy. I mean, I don't take it lightly whatsoever.
No, not at all.
I didn't back then, and mine was in 2004 in Minneapolis.
Well, what do you think what are the odds you think of some of our academy members from Europe? Will they be coming over? And the ones you've talked to? I remember, my first year, man, it was, pre-COVID. So, man, Michelle was there. Jack was there. A lot of them. Graham was there. Of course, I was inducted in with Graham Richardson. So, what do you think, Charlie? Any of them going to try to make the trek over or able to?
Michelle was at the show, at the FESPA show, had a cane next to him.
Right.
So my guess, he's probably like me. I mean, I'm still having trouble. I'm waiting to get my knees done, but
sure.
Michelle is certainly still active, etc. But I'm not sure how excited he is about coming to Printing United, because it's definitely not the type of show that it used to be. As far as some of the other Europeans, I do believe we're going to see some of them. Yannick being one of them.
Good.
Probably. He was, most of them, of course, were at FESPA because it's an easy hop for them. It's kind of like us jumping over to Vegas, Atlanta is probably not the most enticing place to have a show as far as I'm concerned. Years ago, it was great. Now where the convention center has become more and more of a rather dangerous neighborhood, shall we say.
Sure.
So, even when we have the dinner, just going out for drinks afterwards, if we wanted to, is going to be a bit of a challenge. But I'm sure we'll be able to make it.
We'll figure it out.
If they did the show in Vegas, you'd always get a better response, I think. People come to a show to see what the show has to offer, to get educated, which I'm hoping that Printing United starts to promote a little bit more and a little heavier, especially in the areas that we're involved in. Try and get me excited about Atlanta. Pretty tough.
The only thing that I think could be exciting and bring it back, and of course, it's not Sean, who is from Georgia and Atlanta, and I saw that. Is that there hasn't been a Printing United show on the East Coast of the States for a few years now. So that'll be good. I think. I'm just hoping now that the COVID stuff, that there's a better attendance, and in the academy, I think Printing United is putting a little bit better push on textile. They did last year. I think they're going to try to do better this year. Education. 2 years ago, there was some. Last year, they decided not to at all. And man, it hurt them. They got an earful about that from everybody. Yeah. And there were shops that, hey, okay, we're not bringing our crew. It would just be the main players. And that hurt them. And so if they said this year, yeah, we are doing some education again. And they said, yeah, we realize that. And I go, God forbid you just listen to the people who know what they're talking about. But so hopefully it'll be a little bit better.
Well, you have Cassie Green, who's doing the apparel list now. Yep. So that's definitely a step in the right direction. A lot of it is still, is textile oriented, but not necessarily screen print oriented.
Right.
As far as Atlanta goes, then you got to deal with Ray Smith. Really?
Yeah.
I'd rather deal with Ray in Vegas than in Atlanta, but nevertheless.
Well, Ray has the best beard in the industry, so we've got to give him that credit.
What fun things around the convention? Wait, getting mugged must be a lot of fun around the convention.
Well, that's it. Ray's in charge of hospitality then.
Right.
So, all right.
Listen, I like going to Atlanta. I have no problem with it at all. The problem I have is, will it draw European and Asians to that show? And what is it that's supposed to draw them there? And certainly it's not the city, because it's not what they're looking for. Vegas, where there's obviously a lot more going on. And my understanding is they may be talking about doing Orlando, and I can understand where that would also have a draw, because you have Disney. So I don't know.
So can you guys hear me? I'm having some delay.
Yeah,
we can hear you.
We can hear you, Marshall.
Yeah, so my sound doesn't match my photo. I don't know what's going on.
Marshall is also a ventriloquist. You're doing well at it. Thank you.
Photo looks good anyway.
Yeah. So, hey, we're going to have to wrap up here in a little bit. So, Charlie, where, besides your tour, where can they see you next? Probably the Fort Worth show coming up.
Yeah, Fort Worth would be my next show.
And you're teaching your normal classes there, correct?
I am. I'm doing one workshop and I think 3, maybe 4 seminars. You know, one of the things that seems to be popping up heavily is puff ink. So I'm going to be doing a seminar on special effects, which will include puff, which hasn't been around for a long, long time. But, you know, I think I'm doing a basic class. I need to look at my schedule, but you guys are all speaking at that show as well, aren't you?
I'm not speaking at Fort Worth.
Yeah, I'm teaching a class on AI. So we'll be going over Chat GPT and Midjourney and generative fill with Photoshop and stuff like that. That's a new class that they asked me for because the classes that I signed up for earlier in the year, they have a new show director and somehow those got dropped and nobody knows why. So,
well, I know in the past, whatever we do for January, we do throughout the year.
Yes.
This year, January and March were kind of carry on their own. And then September, or, you know, the Fort Worth show seems to be the introduction to what's going to go on for next year.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, you know, they have a whole new crew, nice to work with and all, but definitely not as in touch with what we're involved with to the point of understanding a lot of it yet.
Yeah.
I did put in for next year for you know, a seminar for impressions. I don't even have the contact name, so guys, help me out, send that to me. I think everybody listening, man, if you're going, I mean, talk to Impressions, you know, talk to Printing United, tell them about the education you want to see and the speakers you want, because it's a big part. And the fact that you and I, all three of us, talk to shops, go in there, and people still are going, you can measure tension, really? You know, it's still, you know, this is still fun. The best, it's still about fundamentals, no matter how you slice it. And you know, Charlie, when I first started speaking, one of the best compliments I got, I had a guy going, he goes, Alan, I loved your class. He goes, you know, you say the same thing that Richard Greaves and Charlie Taublieb say. And I go, well, what does that tell you then? And so that was a great.
I am doing a basic workshop, by the way.
Yep.
Now that I look at it.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, that's great. And I really hope people get the education going with these shows. But we don't know. Right. And in the meantime, right, if you want more education, you can come to Shirt Lab. Right. And that's going to be at the end of this month in New Orleans, which is really about business and how to run your shop better, more than how to print. And we'd love to see you there. And also, Charlie, if somebody wants to reach out to you and to find out how you can help them, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Email certainly would be, it's drprint, DRPRINT @AOL.com. Or they can call me or text me at 303-618-8955.
And you're like the last AOL user?
Probably so.
In the world.
Yeah, my wife is still an AOL user, so that makes two of us.
The last two.
Do you send out the CD discs? Remember those?
You know, it's one of those things where you kind of get used to it. I mean, I do have other email addresses, but that's my primary one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, hey, we got to end the broadcast. So thank you so much, Charlie. Don't go away. We're just going to end the broadcast.
Marshall, one last thing on education too. GSG has a bunch of education coming up. Check their website out.
Yeah. Hey, good plug. Thanks, Alan. All right, y'all. So talk to you guys later. Appreciate you. And Alan, who we have hanging out with us next week?
Don't we have, I actually believe it's Cassie from the Apparelists.
Are you sure? I thought it was Allie and Jed, or is that not next week?
I'll have to check. So we have a bunch of people. We have Allie and Jed coming in from Jed from Stakes Manufacturing, Allie Banholzer, who is, I think we have nominated, she is the badass of the industry now. And then we have Cassie coming up, Cassie Green from the Apparelist. We have Dave Dennings from Kiwo Yolano. So we have a bunch.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll figure it out, and then just look for our ad next week and sign up. So, jump in. So, all right, everyone, have a great week, and we'll happy 4th of July. Hope you stay safe.
Yep.
And we'll talk to you later.
Bye
Bye-bye,
now.
everyone.